Hello, everyone. Welcome to Fearfully and Wonderfully Me, a podcast designed to help you become the leader you are destined to be. Today's episode is the first episode in a series that I wanted to do some podcast episodes on the elements of personal growth and transformation that are from my new book, Fearfully and Wonderfully Me, Become the Woman You Are Destined to Be. And this book is just released in this last month or so. And I thought very carefully I knew I wanted to do a series about some of the chapters from the book, and then I tried to choose which chapters really would be most valuable or helpful for the podcast, and which ones really I could kind of dig into the meat of the concepts from the book, and I wanted to share those with you. And so I think this is going to be the first of a 21 part series on the book. So each of the next 21 episodes will be on a chapter from the book. So you don't necessarily have to get the book. I'm just going to share my thoughts. I'm not reading the book to you over this next series of podcasts, but sharing some of my thoughts and kind of adding to what's in the book. So certainly they stand alone, but I wanted to dig into these elements of personal growth and transformation because they are, as I look back over my journey, they are so powerful in sharing this information, because this is how you can walk through that same path for yourself and your journey, right? How can you take the lessons that I've learned and apply them to your situation? And that's really what I like to do is take the lessons that I've learned and make them easier to apply so that other people can learn from them. Obviously, your journey is different than mine, but if you can see and then apply the principles that I've applied to go from where I was, leaving home at 19 with pretty much nothing, to where I am today, it makes it easier for you to apply the lessons that will help you move forward in your journey. So I wanted to do that. It was interesting. I was a guest on someone else's podcast. We recorded the interview last week, and I was a guest on Allison Little's podcast launch. And so that episode will be coming out in several weeks, probably about middle of July, I think. And Allison had read my book, and it had just come out, and she got a copy and read it. And one of the questions that she asked me on the podcast, I really enjoyed my conversation with Allison. So I'll make sure I post the link when that comes out. But one of the questions that Allison asked me is, Ria, why did you write this book just for women? And I had to explain. Sure, the principles in this book apply to both women and men. Absolutely. When it comes to success and influence and leadership principles, it doesn't matter if you're male or female or young or old. If you apply the principles correctly, they will help you. It's kind of like gravity. If you're working with gravity instead of against it, you can learn how to work with it. And so gravity can be a very useful thing. All of the things on my desk aren't floating away right now because of gravity, but I'm working with it here. So, when it comes to why I wrote this book specifically for women, that's really where my niche is, and really where my heart is. I absolutely love to help people of either gender. Nothing wrong with that. But that's it's one of the things I think a lot of speakers or authors don't realize when they get started is they want to share what they've learned with everyone, and that's just natural with all of us. But it's important to realize who we can most effectively help. And for me, that niche, if you want to call it a niche, is women who are interested in personal growth. I'm most able to help that woman who is interested in increasing her influence and developing her leadership and maximizing the results in her life. And some of you are thinking, well, isn't that all women? But no, it's not. There are some women who aren't interested in growing, and that's okay. That's absolutely fine, because it comes down to some people simply don't value personal growth, and that's okay. still love them. It's just that I'm not most able to help those people. I am most able to help those and reach back and help those who are interested in growing and improving their circumstances. So, when it comes to this book, I really just needed to dig into my niche and who I could most help, who the material is most applicable for, considering my story and the lessons that I've learned. So I'm going to kick off this series, this 21-part series, with I'm not starting at chapter 1 of the book, because I shared some of the thoughts from the introduction and that in previous episodes, but I really wanted this episode to be specific on the elements of transformation. So we'll do 3 podcast episodes on each of the elements, just like is in the book. So the first one, today's episode, is self-belief, first element of personal growth and transformation. So self-belief, and the chapter that we're starting with today is I am responsible. And the reason this is important is someone asked me this a question in an interview just yesterday. The question was, Ria, what was the thing that if you could share with anyone who's going through some kind of adversity or facing some kind of challenges, what is the one key thing that kicks off someone being able to grow through that experience and become resilient? And I have to share, just like I shared in the book, the first and most fundamental concept is the self-belief that I am responsible. And what I mean by that is, whether you've been through trauma or not, everyone's gone through adversity, but how quickly we bounce back or how quickly we heal is going to be in large part determined by our ability to accept and willingness to accept that I am responsible for me. And it's Hal Elrod's quote that I've shared with you before that says, the moment I accept responsibility for everything is the moment I can change anything. And that self-belief, I can't stress enough how important it is. I've shared with you before that one of the things that I like to talk about is the factors of what determines how resilient we are. And there are 3 of them. The first one is an internal sense of control, an internal locus of control. And when I first heard the term locus, I had to go look it up. Like I didn't know what that meant. It means that we have the realization that we are responsible for ourselves. Now, we can't control other people. We certainly can't control everything in life. We can't control most of everything in life, but we always are responsible for how we react. We're responsible for our choices. And I've said that over and over again, but it's so important to remember to grab that concept. So the first thing about being resilient is remembering that the place of control is within us. We're not just along for the ride. When things happen, we're not just, kind of like in a boat being tossed about in the ocean of our life. We actually have a paddle and we can steer that boat. We can navigate that boat and we can go to the shore if we want to, or we can go to the awesome island in the middle if we want to. We actually have the paddle. So we're not just in the boat. We actually can do something about it. And the choices that we make and the actions that we take are what steers the boat of our life. So that's really what we're talking about here in this chapter, in this episode, is that concept of I am responsible. Now, things that happen to us may or may not be our fault. And it's important that you grab that concept, because some of you are thinking, I'm not responsible for everything that happens to me. That's absolutely true. Absolutely. A lot of times, though, we find ourselves in circumstances that were influenced or determined by choices we made in the past. And that's hard to accept sometimes. We have to accept that we are responsible in some part for the actions and choices that got us here. Now, I want to dig into that just a little bit. because it's important concept that we separate that. There are some things that happen that aren't our fault, that we aren't responsible for what happened. For example, what happened to me and the trauma that I experienced growing up isn't my fault, right? A 12-year-old girl isn't at fault when her father starts to sexually abuse her and use her. That's not my fault. It's nothing that I could have done to change what he did. That he was the adult and the parent, and a 12-year-old girl isn't at fault when someone starts to do that to her. And I understand that. I didn't choose what happened to me. I didn't cause it. It's not my fault, but I am responsible for deciding how I'm going to respond to it. And that's an important concept. I'm not responsible for what happened in that situation, but I am responsible for what I do about it. Response-able. Now, on the other hand, the time that I was working in a job and I had just a poor leader, there's no other way to say it. Well, I won't go into the details because I really, there's no value in sharing that, but it was a situation where the person was a nice person. They just weren't effective as a leader, as a manager. And they didn't have great leadership skills. They didn't even have mediocre, average leadership skills. And that person was just a terrible boss because they didn't have leadership skills. And now, I didn't make that person be ineffective as a leader, but I chose to accept the position at that organization. I chose my career path. How far you want to take it is I was certainly responsible for some choices that got me into that situation. And I was responsible for the choices that got me out of that situation at some point, right? So you see the difference is we may not be at fault necessarily, but we're always responsible in some way. And even if we're not directly or indirectly responsible for things that led up to or influenced or created that situation, we are responsible for what we do about it, right? Do we stay there for the rest of our lives? That's up to us. Even if we don't physically stay there, if we mentally or emotionally stay there and stay captive to things that happen, that's our choice. And it's hard to accept that, I know, but it's also incredibly freeing because that means, you've got freedom. It's like realizing you're in that boat that I talked about a minute ago, and the storms of life are tossing you about, and that's not fun. But I've just given you the paddle and saying you've got the freedom to steer your boat and go in a different direction if you choose to do so. And, there's some of you thinking, well, I'm not responsible for, some of the things that happen. Maybe you're working in a situation with a poor leader, a bad boss, or an organization that doesn't value you. And you're thinking, well, I need the money. I can't just leave my job. And that might be true, but you are responsible for choices you made in the past. Maybe you decided to buy a house and a fancy car and run up some credit card bills, right? And I don't know, I'm just throwing out examples here, but now you need a job because you need the money because you've got bills to pay. Well, that's absolutely true, but you made some choices on your spending habits that could have been different. Maybe you've got kids and a family to support. Well, there were choices involved when you had those kids, right? And again, I'm just giving you examples to encourage you to think through your situation and saying, you know what? Maybe I'm not directly at fault for this situation, but I am responsible for some choices that I made in the past, and I'm responsible for the choices that I make going forward. I use the example a lot of times, or the analogy. It's like hunger. Every single one of us, you're human, you get hungry, right? That's just the fact. We're not at fault for that. It just happens. Our bodies need fuel. We get hungry. It's a biological, physiological fact. But you are 100% responsible for what you decide to put in your mouth, right? Nobody makes you eat a cookie versus a salad. And so I had to realize that I'm always responsible for what I decide to eat. And because that's important, because, for a long time, I would find myself externalizing the blame. Like if I realized I needed to maybe start eating healthier or exercising more, and if I wanted to lose some weight, for example, I had to realize that nobody's making me choose the food choices that I am, right? I get hungry, sure, that's a fact, but what I do in response to that is absolutely my choice. So, for example, if we go to a Mexican restaurant and I'm sitting there thinking, man, I had planned on eating a healthy salad for lunch today, but here we are at the Mexican restaurant, right? It's easy to start externalizing that and saying, well, gosh, I had to eat those cheese enchiladas and the basket of chips in front of me. No, I don't. Right? I don't have to externalize that blame just because I'm in a Mexican restaurant instead of at home eating a salad. I can choose to pick up those chips and eat them or not. Now, granted, it's a whole lot easier not to eat the chips if they're not sitting in front of you. I absolutely understand that. But where we get caught is we start externalizing the blame and saying, well, gosh, I had to go eat lunch with somebody, and here they bring out this nice basket of chips. And of course, I realize that during this pandemic, no one's really been out to eat lately. But what I'm saying here is we're always responsible for what we choose to put in our mouth, regardless of whether the cheesecake in front of you looks nice at the restaurant or somebody ordered. And so when I realized that, it was incredibly freeing, because then I didn't have to blame someone else for what I was eating. I could choose to order a salad even at the Mexican restaurant instead of eating the basket of chips and the cheese enchiladas. So I hope that, these examples, I almost have to make them a little extreme in order to grab the concept for myself. And I think that helps all of us just understand the concept a little more if we take it to an extreme, because you can see it easier how it can apply in different situations. So yeah, I mean, that we all find ourselves in circumstances that aren't our fault, because we can't control other people. We can't control the weather. We can't control things that happen like coronavirus, but we always control how we respond to it. And I've said that before, and I can't say it enough, because as humans, it's so easy for us to externalize the blame. But the moment we take responsibility is the moment we have the freedom to change and improve that. So when you look around at your situation, that self-belief is fundamental, and it's the key to growing through trauma. It's the key to transformation. It's the key to personal growth. Is first we have to believe deep down that I am the one who's responsible for improving this, for changing this, for getting me out of here, right? No one else is going to be able to do it for us. And probably no one else is willing to, but even if they were willing to, they can't do it for us, right? It's an internal job. Growth through adversity, or becoming resilient, or transforming into the person that you want to become, is an inside job. It's a you and a you thing. And until you grab that first concept, this first concept of I'm responsible, it's not going to be possible to move forward, because that's the fundamental thing. And that's what I shared the other day when somebody asked me that question. I've been doing a lot of podcast interviews and things like that, and that's one of the wonderful things about technology, is that those opportunities have continued to go on even during the pandemic. But so I'll share those links as they come out. I'll push those out to social media. But there again, I just wanted to dig into this concept a little bit more on this first of 21 episodes coming out over the next several weeks on the book. And as you look through your circumstances and your situation today, if I could just give you one takeaway, is just just stop for a moment and reflect. What are the choices that you made in the past that have contributed or influenced to some of your circumstances? Not everything, obviously, but I almost guarantee that there are some things that you could do differently to change your circumstances. So just stop and think about in what ways am I responsible for my life? Until next time. Hey everyone, thanks for listening to the Fearfully and Wonderfully Me podcast. Hey, if you found value in today's episode, will you get social? Will you subscribe to the podcast? Go ahead and hit the subscribe button, leave a review, or get on social media and just share what you found valuable about today's episode. Because here's the thing, those subscriptions, those reviews, and then sharing on social media, that's what helps other people find out about the podcast, and that's what helps other people learn and grow with you. So if you found even just a nugget of wisdom or a quote that you enjoyed, or just something that you really enjoyed about today's episode, just get vocal about it and share it so that others in your network can grow too. Thanks for listening.